We have breaking news just into CNN. Several people have been shot, including a National Guardsman just a few blocks from the White House. D.C. Metro Police said that they are on the scene. They're asking folks in the area to avoid going there. We're now joined by CNN senior law enforcement analyst Andrew McCabe, a former FBI deputy director. Andy, we are just learning from our producer that the scene has been secured. This is 17th and I, 1 block from the White House. There is a suspect currently in custody. Obviously, we have very limited details, just that several people were hurt. At least one member of the U.S. National Guard has been shot.
Bueno, señores, lo que pasó el día de hoy es realmente impactante. La Casa Blanca está en modo cierre total luego de un tiroteo justo afuera del edificio. Hablamos de que hay 2 miembros de la Guardia Nacional, 2 soldados que están heridos y sinceramente hasta el momento no se sabe el estado, solo se sabe que están en estado crítico, están en hospitales separados y por ahora es lo máximo que se puede saber de información. Pero bueno, quiero que veamos cómo llegamos hasta este punto, cómo es que reaccionó Donald Trump y, bueno, recordarles que la semana pasada él mismo estuvo lanzando amenazas públicas en contra de congresistas. El karma de la vida no lo sé, pero bueno, vamos a ver qué es lo que andan diciendo las redes. Veamos lo que estuvieron actualizando los de MSNBC en pleno momento de la noticia. Esto fue hace unas horas atrás. Y bueno, es la cobertura más, podemos decir, más amplia que tuvimos hasta el momento.
That 2 National Guard members were involved in a shooting near the White House this afternoon. At least one of them was struck, and the White House is currently on lockdown. Joining us, MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delaney, and along with MS Now National Security and Intelligence analyst and former FBI supervisor Rob D'Amico. So, Ken, what exactly do we know?
Basically just what you said, Katie. This shooting, I'm told, occurred near the White House in a place called Farragut Square in downtown D.C. We're seeing video on social media of police rushing to the scene. I checked in with the Secret Service because they protect the White House and was told that 2 uniformed National Guard members were involved in a shooting. At least one of them was struck. Their condition is not known. The nature of the incident was not known by this person. It's being handled by the D.C. police, not the Secret Service, because they've decided there's no nexus to the White House, no threat to the White House. So the circumstances of this incident are unclear. Remember, of course, that uniformed National Guard are regularly patrolling the streets of Washington, having been deployed there by President Trump. That's subject to a legal fight. Actually, 5 days ago, a judge ordered the Trump administration to halt that deployment. That's still being litigated. But again, so all we know is that 2 uniformed National Guard members involved in a shooting, one was struck. The condition of that person is unknown at this time.
Yeah, so the AP is reporting that 2 National Guard members were struck, the 2 that were involved. Again, that differs a little bit from our reporting. We'll see if that gets updated. Ken, you were saying that your sources have said there's no nexus. The FBI is saying no nexus. What does that mean?
The Secret Service, meaning there's no investigative, there's no angle for them to investigate this. They've already concluded there was no threat to the White House or the president. It's a shooting that occurred in D.C., and so it's being investigated and responded to by the D.C. police, not by the Secret Service. It remains to be seen. I've also checked in with the FBI. It's unclear at this point whether they will get involved. But right now, the D.C. police is responding, Katie.
All right, so the president is not in Washington right now. He's not at the White House, even though the White House is on lockdown. He, is in Florida for the holiday break. J.D. Vance is, in Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Ok, hasta ahora no se conoce el motivo del atacante, lógicamente, ¿no? Los detalles siguen saliendo, pero en gotas y gotas. En cuanto se tenga información nueva sobre eso, pues obvio, voy a salir rápido a mencionarles. Pero algo nos quedó clarísimo, ¿no? Seguimos viviendo episodios donde los funcionarios públicos sienten que sus vidas están en peligro. Donde cada decisión que toman está atravesada por un miedo real. Y ojo, porque yo no quiero politizar un hecho tan grave como el de hoy. Pero a ver, amigos, ¿cómo no recordar que hace apenas unos días Donald Trump estuvo lanzando amenazas abiertamente en contra de miembros del Congreso, diciendo que tal vez es momento de colgarlos. Gente que ahora tiene 4 o 5 veces más seguridad que hace unas semanas. Y claro, que esto pase justo afuera de la Casa Blanca, ¿no? Lo hace mucho más inquietante. Mientras tanto, ¿dónde estuvo Donald Trump? Pues claro, en Florida. J.D. Vance ni siquiera está en Washington. Anda repartiendo pavos con su familia. Pero bueno, apenas se conoció esta noticia hasta ahora. Donald Trump corrió a escribir en Truth Social y salió en un discurso. Lo que publicó, digamos que tiene un tono extraño, es como si incluso en un momento como este quisiera recordarle al mundo que él es poderoso, que él tiene el control, que va a pasar factura. Y sí, pues bueno, claro que tiene que haber rendición de cuentas, ¿no? Tienen que agarrar a este personaje, tienen que hacerlo pagar. Pero luego de una semana completa donde estuvo amenazando a legisladores, donde su mensaje simplemente era ataques, ataques, amenazas, amenazas, pues hoy por hoy no transmite ninguna calma. A estas alturas, cada vez que Trump publica algo, yo creo que el pensamiento de muchos es: ¿quién va a ser el blanco en esta ocasión? Y no olvidemos algo más, porque Donald Trump no dijo absolutamente nada en los casos que ocurrieron con los demócratas como Melissa Hortman, no llamó a Tim Walz, no envió condolencias ni nada. El gobierno lleva como 2 meses atacando a progresistas, a demócratas, a organizaciones civiles. Incluso Donald Trump ha amenazado a republicanos, ha amenazado con traer el martillo si es que, pues bueno, no acatan sus órdenes. A ver, no quiero que este video sea solo un repaso, ¿no?, de todo lo que Trump ha dicho, pero si no se habla de esto, ¿cómo se supone que se arregla? ¿Cómo se puede corregir una retórica política que termina generando una violencia real? Y es inevitable, ¿no? Al ver un tiroteo en Washington, yo creo que muchos, cuando ven esto, se preguntan, pues bueno, ¿qué publicó Trump esta vez? Nada de lo que escribe transmite tranquilidad. Nada hace sentir que hay un adulto responsable al mando. Y encima, aún hay gente de la derecha que se hace la víctima, como si nos recordáramos que es el mismo Trump que lanzó a sus seguidores en contra de policías en el Capitolio. Policías que hoy son exactamente quienes están respondiendo al tiroteo, y hay 2 que están heridos. ¿Cómo se supone que esos agentes sientan que el presidente los respalda, cuando él mismo perdonó a los que casi los matan? Quizás para algunos esto no tenga una relación directa con el tiroteo, ¿no? Lógico, para mí tampoco. Pero hay algo que sí está conectado, y es una cultura política. Y es que se normaliza la intimidación, la violencia, que no puede, que no quiere detenerse. Y mientras vemos más escenas, ¿no?, como esta en Washington, D.C., lo único que pienso es, una vez más, otra violencia, otro caos, otra amenaza. Y bueno, la derecha salen a señalar nada más. Por supuesto, ojalá que estos 2 soldados de la Guardia Nacional se recuperen por completo. Yo creo que eso es lo más importante, ¿no? Incluso mientras sepamos que nada va a cambiar. Porque no hay propuestas reales. Para frenar la violencia armada no existe nada. Para enfrentar un clima político tóxico no existe nada. Solo tenemos ronda tras ronda de victimización, mártires de cartón. Cuando vi que Trump había posteado algo, la verdad que ni siquiera quise abrirlo. Y es que imagino que ese es el punto en el que muchos llegan, ¿no? Un país donde ver un mensaje del presidente termina generando ansiedad y menos tranquilidad. Pero bueno, escuchamos lo que dijo justamente sobre este tema. Estuvo hablando Mark Kelly el otro día, y con este suceso tiene toda la razón. Escuchen.
I said something that was pretty simple and non-controversial, and that was that members of the military should follow the law. And in response to that, Donald Trump said I should be executed. I should be hanged. I should be prosecuted. He even went on and said something about go get them. I guess, sending a mob to round me and the other folks up. So this is, I think it says a lot more about him than it says about me. He doesn't want accountability. But, Rachel, I'm not going to be silenced. I'm not going to be intimidated.
When you and your colleagues made that video, were there specific, potentially illegal orders that you were thinking about that were the sort of precipitating cause for you guys to get together and do that?
Here's the thing, Rachel. You don't want to wait for your kid to get hit by a car before you tell them to look both ways. It's pretty simple. And if you go back to 2016, Donald Trump on a debate stage talking about, some action that he was going to take. He was reminded by the moderator that that would be illegal, that the military wouldn't be able to follow those orders. And his response, Donald Trump's response was the military would not refuse my orders. And then as president, he talked about shooting people, citizens of this country in the legs, protesters. Now, thankfully, Mark Esper, Mark Milley, explained to him that that would be not be a good idea. Now he's talking about the Insurrection Act, sending troops to more cities, using U.S. cities and as training grounds and U.S. citizens for training of the United States military. So, Rachel, we wanted to do something pretty simple here. We wanted to just remind folks that they need to comply with the law and be reminded, and also explain to members of the military that we have their backs, that we know what's going on. It's part of our job, accountability over the federal government. And this is the response we get. He told the world that we should be hanged.
I wanted to ask you about that pledge, that we have your backs. It's sort of the apex of that piece, that video that you made with your colleagues. What does that mean in practical terms? If I'm an enlisted service member somewhere, maybe I'm serving in Southern Command, maybe I'm asked to do something that I believe is illegal or that I have received advice might be illegal. If those service members are thinking about you right now as being on their side, as having their back, what does that mean in practical terms about what that service member can do when faced with a potentially illegal order from the commander-in-chief and from the chain of command?
Well, Rachel, I spent 25 years in the United States Navy. I flew 39 combat missions over Iraq and Kuwait. Let me start by saying I never questioned any order. And you're required to follow all legal orders. You're also required not to follow illegal ones. And I think most people can figure out, just take some common sense in what would be an illegal order. But I think it's important for people to know that they need to be able to stand up and speak out. And I wanted them to know that members of Congress understand that this president doesn't seem to care about the Constitution, the rule of law. And I have to say, I don't think there's anything more patriotic than standing up for the Constitution. And right here, right now, this week, the president clearly is not doing that.
La intimidación política que se está viendo, señores, es muy grave. A un nivel tan alto que ni la palabra perturbador podría alcanzar, ¿no?, para describir todos los sucesos que han ocurrido en meses. Ni siquiera un año completo, en meses. Pues bueno, señores, pasemos a hablar de otro tema, y es que quiero que hablemos de cómo el movimiento MAGA, cómo la coalición MAGA se está rompiendo por el bolsillo de su propia gente. Hablamos de que la crisis de asequibilidad es uno de los puntos más importantes en este quiebre. Salud, medicamentos, seguro médico, costos básicos, son varios factores, ¿no?, en asequibilidad que están provocando este quiebre en el movimiento MAGA. Sobre todo quiero que veamos por qué es que las declaraciones de Donald Trump no solamente no ayudan, sino que esto encima acelera el deterioro. Veamos este análisis para poder explicar los puntos de quiebre más importantes.
Alan, there are many things that I would recommend to the Republican Party that they ignore Donald Trump on for their own political survival. But one of them is not on health care. Actually, as we've suggested before here, Donald Trump has good political instincts. He understands that health care is going to be one of the top issues involving affordability and also regarding fairness. And so the fact that he's talking about negotiating with Democrats while Republicans on the Hill, especially in the House, are brushing him away, suggests that these House Republicans are just a gang that can't shoot straight, and likely will be a gang that are going to get clobbered in the 26 off-year elections.
I think MAGA is cracking. You are starting to see that on this story and story after story, that the uneasy alliance between a traditional conservative, the kind of movement you were a soldier in years ago, and the modern anti-democratic populist January 6th kind of group, that uneasy, unholy alliance is starting to come apart. It's starting to come apart over, like, should people have health care or not? Should you defend people from an affordability crisis or not? It's coming apart over Epstein. It's coming apart over basic questions of whether this is a liberal democracy or not. And you are actually starting to see moments of courage and moments of people realizing that there is life for them on the far side of Donald Trump, that they may still be here when he's not. And people actually coming back to their senses in certain cases, or in this case, Donald Trump having better instincts about, maybe not caring about people is not the best way to win elections.
And relatedly, your latest op-ed for the New York Times is titled "How the Elite Behave When No One Is Watching," inside the Epstein emails. And you write, in part, this: shaming the public as rubes for succumbing to conspiracy theories misses what people are trying to tell us. They no longer feel included in the work of choosing their future. On matters small and big, from the price of eggs to whether the sexual abuse of children matters, what they sense is a sneering indifference and a knack for looking away. Now, it's a terrific piece. Tell us more about this theme here, about what we can really tell. It matters even from these emails, matters beyond just Jeffrey Epstein himself.
Got to wake up today, and I'm very happy that this story has this visibility right now, because here's what I did. I mean, there's been so much discussion of this Epstein story, and there's so much, sometimes more heat than light. And I decided to do what in our profession we should always do when we're in that moment, which is read the actual thing, right? And it took me 5 days to read all of these emails. A lot of them boring and procedural and about random stuff, the way all of our emails are. But the deeper I got into the emails, I started to realize that there is something very convenient for the power elite that is shown in these emails to keep this to being a story of one monster, one pedophile. That is a very tidy, convenient narrative. And what the emails actually reveal is that Jeffrey Epstein, when he needed to rehabilitate himself after coming back to society as a convicted sex offender, he needed friends to rehabilitate him. He needed to reestablish himself in society. And he needed to choose those people, and he chose well. He chose a power elite, a powerful social network, from Larry Summers to people involved at the Gates Foundation to people involved in Goldman Sachs, former government people in Republican and Democratic administrations, scientists, others. He chose a power elite that actually was quite capable of looking away from his crimes, because for a generation, members of this power elite have looked away at so much other abuse and suffering. Whether the financial crises members of this network have inflicted on the public, whether the wars that some in this network have fraudulently sold to the American public and caused our children to die, whether it's technological obsolescence that members of this network are just forcing on the public. This is a group of people that has a superpower, I would say. This power elite, this Epstein class, has a superpower for disregarding pain. And so when he needed new friends, he found the perfect carbon offset jet set, as I call them in the piece.
Yeah, and Molly, it's so interesting. listening to Anand talk about the elites that, again, the public is revulsed by. It takes me back to that meeting between Donald Trump and incoming Mayor Mamdani. What do the two have in common? They have a lot of things actually in common. As Donald Trump said, some people that voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary voted for him in 2016 in the election. But you look at Mamdani, what just happened? You had an outsider that came in, and Democratic elites were helpless in stopping him, and they voted him into power and threw out one of the most esteemed Democratic dynasties over the past 40 years. With the Cuomos, you look at Donald Trump, it was the same thing. Republican elites hated Donald Trump in 2016. A lot of them don't like him much more now. But rank and file voters wanted Donald Trump to be their nominee. And so you do have elites on the outs, voters who've had enough. And yet I must say in both parties, somehow in both parties over the past 30 years, regardless of all these promises of reform, you still have billionaires, tech monopolists, multinational corporations getting bigger and bigger tax cuts, while you have working Americans and middle-class Americans, buying health care policies, spending too much for those policies, not getting what the insurance company promised in those policies, not getting coverage for what doctors have told them they need to have, and their policies don't cover that, and then going home and having hidden billing charges even after leaving the doctor's office and doing what the doctor told them they needed to do for their own health care. So again, it's just, there is this growing divide between the richest of the rich and the elites and working and middle-class Americans, and it is showing up every 2 years now when voters go to the voting booth.
I would take you back to the first Trump administration. When he ran for office, he would say, the system is rigged, right? He would say, the system is rigged against you, the working person. And in that one way, that was sort of the one truism of Trumpism. And it was this populist, he was trying to tap into the Bernie Sanders populism. Now, ultimately, he did not govern like a populist, but he ran on populism. And ultimately, populism is popular. And people were from the financial crisis and just going along, we have the wealth inequality at a level that we have not seen, since this Gilded Age. So these are real concerns that people are having. And then you
Ok amigos, la principal grieta dentro de MAGA no es política, es económica. Y aquí es parte clave, ¿no? Porque Trump y su discurso no ofrecen ninguna respuesta real a este problema. Más bien lo agravan. Porque, a ver, seamos honestos. ¿Cómo puedes mantener un movimiento unido cuando la mitad de tus seguidores no pueden ni pagar su seguro médico? Literal, señores. MAGAs endeudados por una visita a urgencias. O porque tengan que elegir entre comprar comida o comprar medicina. O sea, esto es insostenible. MAGA no se está desinflando por ideología, sino por supervivencia. La gente puede aceptar discursos extremos. Claro que sí, lo han hecho por mucho tiempo. Pero no pueden aceptar una factura médica de $4,000 por una operación básica. Así de claro. Las declaraciones del trumpismo son tan problemáticas. ¿Por qué? Porque siguen insistiendo en propuestas que no bajan el costo de salud, que no amplían la cobertura y que encima prometió acabar con Obamacare sin ofrecer nada en concreto a cambio. O sea, eso es políticamente suicida. Incluso dentro de MAGA, Obamacare es más popular que Trump. Y eso es un dato, no es una opinión. Su público, lógico que puede tolerar su estilo agresivo, ya están acostumbrados. Sus discursos divisivos. Pero lo que no van a tolerar es perder su seguro médico o ver que sus medicamentos se duplican de precio. Más aún en un país donde la insulina sigue siendo prohibitiva, donde una ambulancia te puede costar casi un sueldo. y donde un plan de salud puede costar más que una hipoteca. Donald Trump insiste en decir que va a destruir el sistema actual sin decir qué solución va a poner en su lugar. Y eso, para cualquier persona, sea maga o no sea maga, es una amenaza directa al bienestar más básico. Por eso, señores, la coalición se está quebrando. La gente está despertando, viendo la realidad, que el movimiento que decía que los defendía, los está dejando completamente solos frente a un sistema que lo exprime sin misericordia. Pero claro, Trump no tiene la culpa, es el sistema. Lo que muchos contraargumentan. Esa es la defensa común. No es culpa de Trump, que el sistema ya estaba roto. Y ojo, eso es parcialmente cierto. Yo no voy a defender un sistema como el que traíamos. Al 100% lógico. Ojo, el sistema venía mal desde mucho más antes que Biden, por cierto. ¿Ok? Pero aquí les digo algo. Si ya estaba mal, ¿por qué Trump sigue insistiendo en empeorarlo? ¿Por qué su propuesta, la estrella de su agenda, es eliminar una cobertura a millones? ¿Por qué no presentó jamás un plan coherente alternativo? ¿Por qué cada vez que habla de salud pública solo promete destrucción y nunca soluciones? El liderazgo no se mide solo por lo que tú heredas, sino por lo que tú haces con lo que te toca. Y Donald Trump, en vez de arreglar, decidió incendiarlo. Por eso, amigos, ese argumento no se sostiene. Pero bueno, ¿qué opinan ustedes? ¿Creen que la crisis de asequibilidad realmente será el talón de Aquiles en el movimiento MAGA? ¿O piensan que tal vez hay otro factor mucho más importante detrás de esta fractura? Los invito a que me dejen sus opiniones en la caja de comentarios. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarme en este video. Recuerden, como siempre, déjame tu like, comparte el contenido, suscríbete al canal. Nos vemos en el próximo video. Hasta luego.